The pillar of India's economy is going through a major transformation that is digital at its core and phygital in its approach to customers. Across physical and digital channels, the financial services sector and especially banks are at the forefront of creating richer and at the same time more cost efficient customer experiences. But in the times that we find ourselves in today, the key question is about business resilience and continuity as digital banking takes center stage in the backdrop of booming online and mobile transaction volumes in the country. To find out how technology is helping this sector shield itself against the challenges of today and tomorrow and leverage intelligent automation to improve customer centricity, cost and resource optimization, and revenue generation, we are here at the Mint Executive Forum, the BFSI chapter. I'm your host, Gautam Srinivasan, and I'll be speaking with two leaders of industry to gain their insights on a variety of business hashtags from hashtag customer, cost, and revenue to hashtag resilience, security, and automation. So without adding any more latency to this talk, let me quickly introduce them to you. Ratan Kesh is here. He's the Executive Vice President and Head of Retail Operations and Service at Axis Bank. And with him is Vijayant Rai, who's the country leader for the BFSI space at Microsoft. Gentlemen, great to have you on board. This promises to be a wide-ranging conversation. So let's start with the customer, especially the significant rise in the number of digital-first banking customers in India. And here I want to refer some statistics. 35% increase in new adopters for online banking, of which 30% have specifically increased their use of mobile banking. That's as per recent reports. India's central bank estimates the number of online transactions growing 500% in the past 5 years. And that number could go up even more as the RBI has now allowed NEFT and RTGS transactions via mobile wallets and made them interoperable. So your mobile wallet will double up as your bank account. So that's the broad positive. But coming to you, Ratan, when every bank is moving towards improving customer experience, how do you create a customer proposition that is attractive enough, which goes beyond just the experience layer, considering volatile consumer sentiment and a change-prone market with so many players?
Thanks, Gautam, for having me here. It will be wonderful to have conversation with you and of course, Vijayant. I look at it at three pillars of really banking. The fundamental pillar of banking, in my views, has to be the governance and the compliance layer. And if we have a very strong governance and compliance layer, that helps in two ways. One, building trust among the customers, and B, it gives the employees an enormous amount of ease and comfort because then they know that I cannot make mistakes. So we've been working very strongly on creating automated sort of triggers to make sure that you are meeting the governance norms, and I'll talk a bit more about it as you progress. The second pillar is on the governance layer, you build customer experience layer by bringing in solutions with the help of Vijayants of the kind to really bring the AI and the digital layers. And in that, whether it is about products or services, we have been building lots of these journeys. So take, for example, we can actually, for an existing customer, we can disburse a personal loan in our digital lending platform in just about few seconds. We now have a capability to create a video KYC based account opening instantly by doing several of pinging from the various government sites and really set up an account in just about few minutes. We have a capability which is an award-winning capability of an SME offering, wherein we are able to give a completely new to bank customer a certain ticket size of SME loan by doing complete credit evaluation in just about few minutes. And these are all product offerings. On the service layer, we've been working on really do-it-yourself models, the voice bot, which has worked really, really well for us. We launched it during the middle of pandemic. And today, most of the basic services, whether it is about balance inquiry, whether it is about statementing, etc., almost 17 services are being handled by the bot in a very seamless manner. So what the bot does is that bot has an ability to understand Hindi, English, and English, and bot is able to understand the intent and go and trigger a particular transaction for the customer. Or if bot is not able to respond to the customer, bot is able to take it to the right queue and reduce the average handling time for the customer to build a customer experience. Then let me conclude the third pillar, which is very important. What happens is when you are able to delight a customer, and the employees are at ease because they are not able to make mistakes because of the whole governance layer, they are now utilizing the time for delivering a lot more of service driven sales initiatives. So the sales service channels are delivering a lot more product offering today because the two layers that you've created, and it is really working well for us.
All right, so that's the three pillars which has been explained by Ratan, and it's important from an understanding perspective from whoever is watching, that governance and compliance, and from there a customer experience layer, which in turns, when it's improved, adds sales service channel layers which are more productive, and therefore it all comes together to provide a better experience for customers, more productive employees as well, and overall a more holistic approach that the bank takes. And it's fantastic to see so many initiatives that you mentioned, that we now have video KYC, SME loans, a DIY model, as you say, for the customer, more power to the customer, and voice bots, which are playing a more active role here. So Vijayant, you've heard Ratan bring out the gamut of offerings which Axis Bank gives to its customer. The question is, what's your view on how banks can, from here on, reimagine the way they currently service customers and the possibilities that they're yet to tap, which while still keeping in control the costs? Because it seems that we could say that we are entering the era of banking as a platform, where banking business models kind of look forward to transforming to an open ecosystem of partnerships. So if that happens, that opens up a whole gamut of options for banks themselves, where they can focus on their core business while at the same time having an ecosystem of partners to solve customer problems as they come along. What's your view on this?
First of all, thanks, Gautam, and thanks for having me. And it's wonderful to share forum with Ratan again. Specifically, if you look at customer centricity and the way the banks are going about it right now, obviously we've all seen this massive acceleration of digital in this period of unfortunate period of pandemic in the past 2 quarters. And even before that, if you notice, and there's been a massive amount of digitization on the consumer side. So the customer today is far more digital savvy. And there are things like, for example, the massive adoption of UPI-based, digital payments, which have accelerated the whole motion on the consumer side. So there is this, this whole acceptance for digital in a bigger measure than there ever was. The interesting thing here is that, as banks have had to reimagine, rewire their customer engines, specifically looking at, a physical less or a less physical interaction with their consumers for sales and service. There is the audience there, which is far more receptive. Things like the UBI and the digital payments mechanisms, which we have created a lot of trust already, at a mass scale in the populace per se. So that helps. Technology obviously is the big player here. I mean, in terms of trying to bring in technology to reimagine and rewire, Microsoft has been working with a very large number of banks in the country in the past few quarters to sort of completely rewire their customer journeys, the way they do sales service. We're working, for example, in a big way with Axis Bank for a number of those initiatives. But I think the key thing here is utilizing technology smartly so that you can deliver outputs which basically further the way you interact with your customers from a sales service perspective. Tech today exists in the form of cognitive AI, various capabilities which you can then create products and innovate with that. The good thing is, again, this whole paradigm from a banking perspective needs to be secure as well, because we are working in a regulated environment. Important that whatever banks are putting out there is secure for the customers. As there is a massive amount of acceleration, there is also the other elements which come into play, and how do you actually make sure that you're delivering customer experience in the safest possible way for your consumers. So from a Microsoft perspective, right from reimagining CRM systems from sales service to providing technologies like bots and cognitive solutions for various measures of sales and service interventions, helping banks actually modernize their applications to ensure that they can actually modernize applications, be far more agile internally. And I think the single biggest piece which we have observed in the past few quarters in this way of functioning, where we've had lockdowns and then we have had some amount of reopening, and again this unfortunate period, is the whole element of collaboration. And this is where we have seen that we've been able to work with banks to enable their employee base to collaborate with each other, to collaborate with customers as well, using various technologies as seamless as possible. But I think when we look back 5-6 years down the line, Gautam, what we'll probably find is this period of time would be that inflection point where banks have completely changed, the way they've been interacting with customers. This is probably the time when they become take it to a different level in terms of customer centricity.
That's actually something which you have to admire the banks, considering they had to accelerate their pace of digital transformation with the thin staff that they have due to the pandemic, and the fact that they've managed to keep things running itself is a matter of commendation. But as you mentioned, when it comes to security, I think I'll wrap it up in the broader context of resilience as well. And here I want to mention the fact that I was reading an article on banks facing a resilience test, sort of say, amid the pandemic as digital volume shot up. Now, the stats show that 80 to 90% of SMSs and OTP messages failed to get delivered when telecom service operators implemented the template registration and scrubbing regulations, which were formulated by the TRAI to eliminate spam and fraud communications. And Ratan, I want to understand from you how Axis Bank leverages data, AI, and automation to enhance fraud detection and prevention, while most importantly avoiding the pitfalls that come with it.
Yeah. I think Vijayant made a very important point around resilience, and he said that, look, this period of COVID actually helped the banks to build more resilience, and along with that, I will add that element of predictability. So the ability to have resilience and predictability, and therefore deliver consistent operation and consistent service, is going to take us to a new level. Now, coming back very specifically to the fraud element of it, look, this is a menace. I mean, this is something which is really, it's a very difficult one to tackle. For us, close to 20 million cards.
Ratan, if you could repeat your last line. Unfortunately, there was a bit of an audio interruption on your side. If you could repeat your last line.
Every day.
We seem to be.
So I'm saying, with 20 million card base, close to 44 million account base, and millions of transactions happening, there are always a propensity of somewhere some customer being. Is it?
There's a bit of a latency issue which we seem to be facing. But you could try with your answer again, and we'll see if it works out.
Okay. No. So I was saying that, look, for a bank like ours, the scale is very large, and with 20 million cards, 44 million accounts, huge amount of transactions that are happening, all of you spoken about, there is always a possibility of some customer being attempted to be duped by some corner of the globe. And what we get to see is that often gullible customers are falling prey to that. And here, gullible does not mean less educated. Some very well-educated customers often really get attacked by a fraudster. They either create an anxiety or they try to misuse the anxiety in customer's mind. Let's assume a customer would have attempted to try and do a e-commerce transactions or a problem with a bank and goes to the social media to vent out an anger or to seek a support. Somebody immediately pops up and engages into an online chat conversation that then is taken to a phone conversation, and it makes it look so authentic that the customer ends up sharing some of the details, and even before the customer comes to know, the money is gone out of the account or the card transaction has happened. Now, it is not easy to really tackle it so easily. Therefore, we have a very robust risk monitoring engine. Of course, the scalability is provided by Vijayant of the kind to really bring that whole the data analytics platform, wherein we do what we say a multiple patterns. You look at it: a new card, new beneficiary got added. One beneficiary is getting added by 3 different cards. A same customer is doing multiple transactions in 3 different cities in a short time span, etc., etc. We look at all of these, and these are then looked at for creating the not so pattern transaction, and therefore which are outside the pattern, which then helps us to really put triggers. And you won't be amazed to see that we are actually able to identify potentially 98.2% cases. We're able to identify the potential fraud and prevent those. That 1.2% itself is very high, where we are not able to connect to the customer at the real time, or we are unable to really get through to the customer's response. Now, what we do therefore is that in each of these scenarios, there are false positives, then there are false negatives. And the beauty about this AI driven capability is that it is learning from each of the success and each of the failures, and therefore the risk engine gets enriched time and again. So that's the one fraud dimension of it. Second, of course, we do a lot of customer communication. The other few areas which I want to talk about, what we do for, let's say, account opening. Today, the entire KYC is done through AI for me. And when you say account opening, people may think it's simple one. There are 80 odd validation checks that we do, whether it is about your Aadhaar number pinging, PAN pinging, or whether we to do it with the bank's own DDU or with the industry data. 80 security checks are done instantly using an AI model. We do use AI in the trade transaction. Trade is an extremely regulated with lots of FEMA norms, and very few bankers would have that significant knowledge about trade transactions. We have converted that into AI capability. AI takes care of from an OCR based extraction and then continues to do all of those compliance checks on the background. We run almost 60 million checks in a year using the AI. The clearing checks are reviewed by the AI for the date, amount, and figure matching, the signature from the core banking. All of these are done using the AI, and all of these help in building sort of a more resilient operations from an efficiency perspective, error-free, and therefore preventing fraud, and also delivering faster turnaround and customer experience. So these are the few dimensions of sort of, I would say, fraud detection, fraud prevention mechanism that we use for using data and analytics.
Right, and how important does the automation factor play here, along with the human element? Because when it comes to fraud detection, the
automation factor automation plays a significant role. Let me take for example a secured fraud, which means somebody would have done a transaction using credit card, or says that I have a credit card fraud happened in my card. What we have is we have all these inputted in one CRM system. So the CRM data picks up all the relevant fields. Then using an automation, it goes and checks in my Finacle that yes, a 10,000 rupee transaction has happened. Then it goes to the OTP log, find out yes, the OTP was transmitted to the customer's mobile phone. It raises a chargeback instantly to the merchant. It sends a communication instantly to the customer, and using an AI, we actually identify the genuineness of the customer's claim, and for certain percentage of cases, we credit the customer instantly and confirm that we have given a credit to you. So you please feel free, be at peace. All of these are done using an AI model, using the power of CRM, enter data once, and then running all of this through an automated model and through some of these RPA that we run at the backend. So automation.
All right, so those are the possibilities. And Vijayant, as you hear Ratan outline the various ways that Axis Bank has used technology to build resilience and also to enhance security. Tell us about how Microsoft helps financial institutions integrate more intelligent automation in their DNA to manage multiple processes across front, mid, and back office operations, many of which might still be operated manually to deliver cost and resource optimization and revenue generation. Because a big issue for many would be that there's still a significant presence of legacy systems. So how do you bring in intelligent automation in a space which is so highly regulated and still enhance digital transformation efforts for all these financial services companies?
Sure, Gautam. I mean, the interesting thing, Gautam, is when we started our financial year, and Microsoft financial year starts in July. So it is sort of bang in the middle of the pandemic last year. What we did is we went across, talked to a bunch of our customers in the bank, and we basically wanted to find out what are the big themes which resonate with and what do we need to work with across this. And it's interesting because the four themes which came out, one was cost and resource optimization, second was revenue generation, the third was risk and compliance, and the fourth was security. So essentially, what we did, as a team which looks out for banks and works with banks extensively from Microsoft, we had those four themes, and then went back to the drawing board to say how can we deliver those themes for our partners and our customers in banks. And the interesting thing was, as we got into the year, as everyone's aware, the pandemic had sort of already got hold of things. At that point of time, I think the biggest thing banks were looking at when they're looking at cost and resource optimization, was to see how can they get all their employees productive, working from home, some of them working in offices to a percentage, etc. So the big activity which we did working with various banks at that point of time was to see how can we help them optimize and empower their employees so that they can work from home effectively and secured in a very secure fashion. So that's where again we had a massive amount of teams or Microsoft teams getting there to banks to work with them from a collaboration standpoint. So when you look at cost and resource optimization, we looked at employee empowerment. How do you look at cost and resource in that context? We looked at applications which the banks have and how can we help them modernize those applications. Some of them, like you said, are legacy applications that have been there for a long time. Can you make interventions which still give the outcomes which the banks are looking for on the surround side? And we work with those strategies as well. So we looked at, for example, we had a very, very large amount of acceleration with banks moving applications to the Azure cloud, essentially giving the benefit of the public cloud, which is secure, etc. We looked at, areas where we can bring in our partners. Now we have a massive set of ISV partners who work on the Azure cloud, provide solutions from, work from home to bot solutions for CRM or frontline sales solutions. So all of that was brought into play, essentially to help banks quickly accelerate. Things which you can pick up and go and deploy quickly instead of going and building things. We had that from our partners available to do that. And then we looked at areas like, for example, revenue generation. As you move to a different world where you're not so physically interacting with your consumers, you're not doing all those roadshows and all that, how do you go about these things? And that's where we looked at modernizing CRM systems, sales service, right across the customer journeys that banks do. Interestingly, we also found that banks are in this whole phase creating a huge amount of innovation of their own. For example, banks are creating super apps, right? Applications at the customer end, which sort of collapses a lot of things they do with consumers, and to the scale of hundreds of millions of users on the other side. So we've had involvement in those sort of places. We're seeing banks who are actually going out there and creating ecosystems and marketplaces. Very interesting trends. Initial stages, we're working with a few of them, but essentially what we're seeing from a revenue generation standpoint is for delivering differentiated customer experiences. Banks are actually completely reimagining the story around their CRM piece. They're bringing in newer elements. They are doing a lot of work with fintechs, for example, as well. Ratan talked about that earlier, to bring that whole ecosystem to essentially help their better customer experience there. So end to end, if you look at cost and resource optimization, revenue generation, and then we look at the security. As you're doing this, risk and compliance and security are important factors. What we as tech vendors do is provide all of to ensure that when banks are going about getting new products in the most secure fashion possible, most agile fashion possible, and public cloud actually helps that, because right from the time you conceptualize to go to market on a public cloud in a secure infrastructure, it's a much faster journey. So I think across all those elements, a strong place which we've seen in the market.
Any particular customer experience story stood out for you? You work with a lot of the financial institutions. Any particular automation journey story which stood out for you as a customer story?
Yeah, it's interesting. Multiple of them, to be honest. One of them, when initially when the pandemic started off and you had a majority of the bank's population working from home, we had situations where the branch banking side, for example, things which, somebody has to go to a branch and do, we actually work with banks to look at the whole workflows, automate that using different tools from Microsoft, so that things can be done actually with folks sitting at home securely, different checks and measures in place, and automated that. So a huge amount of straight-through processes, which eventually went into digitization. We've seen that happening right from branches to the sales side of things. Ratan talked about the bots experience for better service. So a number of that has happened. In the insurance industry, right from, for example, lead to policy issuance is happening, on CRM platforms. So multiple areas of innovation and digitization there.
Ratan, you have something to add there?
Yeah, see, we actually took help from Microsoft, and really they have been quite helpful for us. So we created what we call as One Axis app. The One Axis app is distributed to all the 40,000-50,000 of our sales folks, and using Microsoft Intunes, we inbuilt the CRM into it for the sales guys to sit at home and engage with customers. So we started off by saying, we will just only inquire about the well-being of the customers and ask them, how are you? And that itself built a huge amount of loyalty to say, look, during this pandemic, somebody is asking, how am I? And our customer experience score went up by 9 percentage point in just about 6 weeks. That
You
was
showed
actually
more empathy to your customers.
yeah, just the fact that but then we use that as a capability to be able to sell lot many more products, and then it was, as we call it, as a pre-COVID, it was like 40/60. During COVID, it became 10/90. 90% of the sales were actually happening, and the service were happening through this app. And that app has become integrated into every sales guys. Now we call it as a BYOD. Bring your own device, Microsoft Intune, CRM inbuilt. It has got product features to demo. It has got product journeys created there, and you can actually do it completely end to end.
All right. Truly, Dil Se Open, as your tagline suggests.
And that's exactly what you call it as Dil Se Open.
Indeed. And you mentioned BYOD. Let me add another abbreviation, which you earlier mentioned, which is DIY. Now, customer service does play an important role in CX management as well. And many digital leaders in the financial services industry are now working on DIY initiatives. So, Ratan, what's your opinion on this?
See, look, DIY is always there. I mean, we've all been creating internet banking, mobile banking journeys. But what happened, and it's a term which has borrowed from someone, which is BC before COVID, DC during COVID, and after COVID, AC. AC has become during COVID, it got fast track. So today I've got, like for example, if you go to my branch, I've got 95% of the journeys are STP done in the branch without any further friction in the entire chain. Now, how it is done? We are creating the journeys once and we are making it available across all channels, which means you can do it yourself, sitting at your home or office. If you call up my call center, they will use the same journey as an assisted journey, but the journey remains the same. If you go to the branch, the same journey is used, which means you create the journey once, but then replicate across all sort of channels. So that's one thing that is happening. Many of my service offerings today are now 90% STP, which means you can do it STP 90%. And our endeavor is that, like take for an example of address change. You can go to a branch and say, change my address. Now we have got a capability to say, you go to my mobile app, you input your few data points, it will actually pull the data from your Aadhaar site, pre-populate rest of the data. You can attach your Aadhaar or your address proof document. It has an OCR extraction capability. It will cross-check and then it will pass it through STP. So that's a do-it-yourself capability. This is what we have done for 21 services. And I must say that it has given us enormous amount of benefit in terms of efficiency, but also to the customer, it has given us significant customer experience benefit.
That's truly an omni-channel approach to solving customer problems, if I could say that. We're almost out of time. So, Vijayant, how about we get a summary statement from you based on the talk that we have had between you and Ratan? Banks and FSIs have a big renewed focus on data to obtain real-time insights, to create and deliver differentiated products and services for their customers. And as per the examples that you heard from Ratan, there are many of them which are available today and are coming up. So, how do you see data playing a role in the overall CX strategy of organizations?
I think data is and will always be sort of front and center of any strategy. I mean, eventually that's the content. I mean, that's what you work on. That's from where you get your intelligence. That's where you create your upsell, cross sells. Everything pretty much is based on the data banks have. And like I said, banks have a lot of legacy data. They have a lot of new data which is coming in, structured, unstructured data, a lot of that. And what we as Microsoft do is actually help banks organize the data, get intelligence out of the data, use it for their advantage. I mean, today we run some of the largest data lakes and data warehouses in financial services in India. Massive amount of experience both around engineering and working with core folks in the business, in banks, in terms of both data lakes and warehouses. And we've seen it's an evolving space. Every bank needs to have a very comprehensive strategy for their data, right across from from what they're doing with their employees to what they're getting for their customers. How do they ingest the data? How do they actually utilize, analyze, and then get actionable coming out of the data? So data is going to be front and center. The good thing is, I mean, you have amazing tools out there, from organizations like Microsoft, which will help you right across that journey in terms of planning, as well as making sure that you're able to utilize data for competitive advantage. So I mean, in summary, I would say data is the new oil, like people keep saying. It is front and center. It's something which if well planned for, can serve organizations.
Okay, Ratan, your summary statement.
You see, with all this AI, machine learning, data analytics, cognitive, you will continue to have some friction somewhere, and that will then fall into a human being. Therefore, what doesn't go away is the fact that human beings' ability to deliver a superior experience, putting yourself in the shoes of the customer, and really showing that little empathy in that point of need, that doesn't go away. And that's what we believe, that with all the digital, everything that we still do, we will continue to focus on being Dil Se Open, Axis Bank Dil Se Open.
All right. Well, that brings us to the end of this discussion. Thanks to all of you here for sharing your insights with us. It was indeed a very exciting conversation, and thank you so much to Ratan and Vijayant for sharing with us all the diverse viewpoints on this topic. And before we sign off, I'd of course like to thank Microsoft for partnering with us. I hope we can invite both of you again very soon for another wonderful session. But till then, stay well and take care.
Thank you, Gautam. Thanks, Vijayant. It was wonderful.
Thanks. Bye-bye.